in front of Cersei. I mean, if that was Dany, that was let's switch the roles for just a hot second. If that was Dany sitting there and she's being shown this demonstration by Jon, and that was how he had presented himself to her, and he lets this thing out of the box and it comes charging at Dany, I have to imagine that there would have just been a pile on Dany moment there, and they would have let that thing just chew through him before they would have gotten to her.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's all right.
So, this is a live show.
I really liked that point.
To back that point up, so when Euron, what we assumed was pussying out and leaving, and he comes over and he approaches Dany, you see Jorah put his hand on his sword, and all of the Dothraki are like ready to pounce on him. So like, yes, like I fully believe that is true. That they would have been like just a circle around her, like ready to take down whatever it was.
And Cersei's motherfucking pregnant.
Well, but not a lot of people know that.
Right, but
And
Jaime does.
to play devil's
Jaime
advocate-
didn't jump in front of her.
But he
That
got up out of his
shocked
chair.
me. Well, yeah.
He was the only one.
Joe, I love you. If anything like that comes at me, you better get in front, all right?
But here's kind of the point I feel needs to be made. Like, people knew that Euron was a threat in that moment, or could have been. No one knew what was coming out of that box. I don't think... Like, you know how to react to something that's alive. Like, clearly, you stab Euron in the throat, he's going down. At that moment, no one really knew what was coming out of that box. Not saying that, like, they shouldn't have jumped out in front of it, but they didn't know what it was.
They hadn't gotten the live demo on how to kill a white yet.
Yeah. No, that QVC pitch from Jon.
Yeah, so then we get Qyburn with a massive, like hard-on for this like zombie shit that's going on.
I thought it was...
Let me just look at it.
I honestly thought he was just going to put his robes over the hand, like, this is mine now.
Seems to be working.
And then beckon the mountain to follow him.
He's the creepiest guy ever. Like,
So
he
good.
would play, whoever that actor is, would play Smithers from Simpsons in a live-action adaptation. Like, he's such a creepy guy.
He's so creepy and so good. But yeah, then Jon goes into this exposition about how they kill him by burning them or with dragon glass or whatever. And then I think Cersei or somebody asked Dany, how many did you see? And there were at least 100,000. And then this is when we get Euron walking out and petting the dead little white
Stroking its hair.
Yeah. And that's when he decides to say, I'm out, peace, deuces, because this shit is scary, I guess.
I was disappointed by that line. When I loved that he asked if they could swim. I thought that was hysterical. But I was disappointed when he was
literally called that. You said it before he did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I was really disappointed when he was like, I've seen a lot of things. And this is the scariest shit I've ever seen. I was like, really? You couldn't like jazz that up just a bit? Like, I don't know. It felt very insincere. And I guess now knowing the end of the episode, it makes more sense. But in the moment, it just felt very, I think insincere maybe is the best way I could say it.
No, I think that's fair. I also think, Brogan, you pointed out while we were watching, you're like, didn't you just see 2 fucking dragons land and that shit didn't scare you?
Yeah. There's still that disconnect, but I'm glad they cleared that up later in general.
Right. They just needed
because it was that moment where you're like, what the fuck? And like you almost felt like that was a win for Theon at that specific moment because you were like, okay, now Euron's bitching out, and like Theon was standing there. He was in the Colosseum, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because Euron looked at him on the way in, and so we saw like Euron being scared and running, and I almost thought, and they literally made the point to show us the scene in the previously on Game of Thrones at the beginning of the show where Theon jumps the ship. And so it was like that moment, like, all right, maybe this is part revenge for Theon, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so then we get where really true Tywin Lannister comes out of Cersei, and she kind of plays along, and she says, okay, yeah, the threat is very real, but I will only accept as long as the King of the North swears to stay in the North and not take sides in this battle. And, of course, Jon, in true Jon fashion, which I freaking love, has to pull an Abe Lincoln. He just can't even fucking lie.
Or a Ned Stark.
Yeah, and Ned, yeah, exactly. In this moment, he's the only person out of the entire group of people, the entire, everybody we see in the episode that truly couldn't lie in this situation, even though lying was probably the better option, and he doesn't do it. And he trusts that people will eventually make the right decision or that it'll work out somehow. But he already said, I've pledged my allegiance to Daenerys Targaryen, and I can't do this. And that prompts Cersei to leave.
That was that moment, too, where it was like, two thoughts on it. Number one, good for Jon Snow, because I think at that moment I was like, just fucking lie, and I even said it out loud, and we were all like, just saying, just lie. What the fuck's wrong with you? Like, you almost wanted to start saying this is bad writing. You almost wanted to start saying like this is stupid. But then when you heard him explain why, and it was like, if everyone lies, then there's no point in talking anymore. There's no that's how we all fall, is if everyone starts lying. And so like taking a stand at a big moment like this was an important thing to do. But my second point was, Cersei knew that Jon wasn't going to do that. Like, this was all part of Cersei's plan. She knew that if she asked Jon to do this, Jon wouldn't switch allegiances. She wouldn't do that, and that would be her exit cue. And so that's when she left. And so I think, if we look at the puppet master that is Cersei pulling the strings, this pre-orchestrated moment that sort of, in her mind, was going to, like, punch a hole in the armor of their army by saying, like, Jon's weak because he can't lie. She made on her exit, everyone looked at Jon and be like, why couldn't you have just fucking lied? And so it was that moment, like, that was her sort of offensive maneuver.
I'm not sure I see her like knowing that he can't lie, but I definitely know that either choice is good for Cersei. He either says, yeah, absolutely, and then she has his word against that, or it's the other way around and she says, all right, well, I'm out because I got to get something in return for this, right? But that's the deal making that she's doing in this scene.
She won either way.
So I'm really excited to get to the next scene that happens then, when Tyrion ultimately, and I'm stealing your job a little bit, Joe.
You're good.
But
we're going to have to jump.
I think that was the next one, right? Or
Essentially,
yeah. So let's jump there. There was a cool moment from Brienne before that happens that's probably worth mentioning too.
Super important too.
Yeah, go ahead.
God damn it, I would have done this so much better.
I'm sorry. That's why you're the master of scenes.
Cersei storms out, and Brienne kind of follows after Jaime, and she's like, hey, man, like, you just saw what you saw. This has to happen. Like, go talk to your sister. And he's like, well, I'm loyal to Cersei. You're loyal to Dany, and I think she, like, her pet dolt or something like that. And then Brienne, of all people, the person who's probably the most oath-worthy person, obviously has a sword named Oathkeeper, is literally like, fuck loyalty. That doesn't matter. You just saw this. You know what we have to do. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? She's not going to listen.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's truly like throw everything else out the window that you know, because this is that important. Anybody that's seen it. Transition.
Nice. So we get the moment where Tyrion knows the only way that he is going to rectify the situation, he is going to sacrifice himself. So a brave moment from Tyrion. Maybe the bravest moment that we've seen from him since the Battle of Blackwater, where he's going to put himself right in harm's way to do the right thing. So he goes to speak with Cersei, but before he does that, he has a really interesting and what's becoming an increasingly my favorite interaction on this show is between Jaime and Tyrion.
Agreed.
Does anybody want to talk about that scene or dive into that one?
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, I can do it. I'm gonna go.
No, I think Jaime and Tyrion and the actors that we've been talking about are so damn good at like portraying this inner angst and hurt to like talk to each other about like betraying each other essentially, or like, why can't we just be on the same side? It's because our damn sister's in the way, this entire moment. So I thought it was like really something to appreciate about Tyrion's character when he said like, well, I'm gonna be the idiot this time because it's that important to me, and if I die, so be it, essentially, to his brother who really cares about him. And I think we all kind of felt like, holy shit, Tyrion's gonna die and Jaime's gonna have to kill Cersei in this moment.
For sure. I thought it was
No, go for it.
I thought it was kind of a cool switch up, is you see them in the dungeon a couple episodes ago, and it's a really tense encounter where they're cutting each other off and they're kind of like saying their pieces, and then all of a sudden in this hallway right before Tyrion's, I guess, gonna fall on his sword, they have this like more brotherly love reaction to one another, and it was just like, it was entirely different and just a very cool switch up to like how far they've come. And I think part of that, if anyone wants to disagree, you're more than welcome to, is that I don't know, Jaime's seen all of this stuff now, like Loot Train happened and it's changed his mind, and he's seen all of these things, and now he saw a white, and I think he's starting to realize more and more like maybe Tyrion wasn't so wrong about things.
I think Jaime and Tyrion's journeys both have been very similar from where they came from at season 1, very jaded, very all about instant gratification, and and just kind of living the life of luxury with all the money that they had, to really, becoming adults and realizing what's at stake, and really being all about family and loyalty and choosing sides and figuring out where they're going to move from here. Their arcs, I think, have been very similar, very paralleled. And I think that in this scene, it was very fascinating to watch those two actors come together and share the screen and have those conversations and that dialogue. And I think what Game of Thrones has done, and not to harp on it so much, but that all of that buildup that we've had season after season, anyone with siblings and just family relations, I think in general, you see someone that you've known since you were a kid, right? And you almost half sentences and you know exactly where that person's going, right? You have that connection, that familiarity, that understanding of each other without even having seen them for years. And I think Game of Thrones has done that with so many different characters and connections, and it makes scenes like this all that more powerful, where it's short, it's to the point, but the look between the two of them, the things that they've gone through, the things that they've shared, the people that they know both together and separately, it all comes across in just so few words. And I think that makes shows like this so powerful.
You're right, even down to like the more crazy instances of that with the Hound and the Mountain. There was like barely any interchange, but you even felt that like the Hound with a line like, "What did they do to you, brother?" It was like, shit, he does care for him in a weird sort of fucked up way. Yeah. Anyways, so the other cool thing that this show is doing is, even though in my humblest opinion, this season, they were a bunch of pussies about killing people off. Like, they just couldn't do it. At least they saved this threat of killing off a character like Tyrion for the finale, where there was, like, some real tension leading into that scene where you're like, fuck, this could be the death of Tyrion, or this could be the death of Jaime. Like, these were two moments where, saving them for the finale really worked in the benefit of the writers, to the point where we thought we know what was going to happen, and turns out we did know what was going to happen, but nonetheless, still ratcheted up the tension to a good point. So let's get into the Cersei-Tyrion conversation.
Yeah, so essentially I wrapped it up in 5 words.
Perfect, because we're running short on time.
So my notes are tense, family, mountain, wine, and pregnant. That's like the gamut of what happens in here. And I think to even Beth's point, like, we see the exact same thing happen with Cersei and Tyrion, where they know each other so well and they're talking at each other to like hit on these notes that really resonate with each other. But it gets to the point where it's so tense that Tyrion has to go like chug a glass of wine and then pour one for his sister and all that. So my question here is like, who came out on top of this? Because was Cersei always playing the long con here, or is this a Tyrion win for him to get her back out into the dragon pit?
Can I answer your question with another question?
Sure.
Yes. Did they cut a deal in that scene that we don't see after they cut back to the dragon pit?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because to be honest, and I wrote this down because I thought it stood out, Tyrion blankly says, "I don't want to destroy our family, I never have." And it's such a switch up from being Team Dany to all of a sudden, and I get that obviously the Lannisters are his family and it's how he grew up, but maybe it's the anxious viewer in me that I always think there's got to be some other ulterior motive. I just think he may have cut a deal that allowed her to come back out and be like, "Yeah, you want to know what? We'll join up. Like, we'll send our forces north," and then obviously she's playing it, but like, I that's just where I'm at.
I think this entire season has shown us, especially with Arya and Sansa, not to scene jump, but that there's a lot happening behind closed doors that we're not getting to see anymore, right? So I completely can subscribe to, there was a lot more to that conversation that we obviously didn't see, which is unfortunate. However, I do feel like everything we've seen from Tyrion when we did used to get to see behind closed doors has led me to feel strong enough about his character and the way that he makes choices and decisions that I don't see him betraying Dany. And I don't know that a deal he would make would have to necessarily, but I also feel like he, in his core, would never trust Cersei to actually go through on a deal.
those reasons exactly are why I think a deal was made, but if there was a deal made, it's going to be that at the end of all of this, Cersei gets to kill Tyrion. And he maybe even offered his own life for that, because